Hi, I'm Daniel Fisher here at Sweetwater, and on today's Synth Clips, we're going to talk about unison mode. And it means different things depending on which synth you have. It kind of means different things whether it's an analog synth or a digital synth. But I'll show you a couple, and you can apply that toward yours. Basically, what it usually does is if you have a synthesizer that can play more than one note, like a non-monophonic synthesizer, like a duophonic all the way up to fully polyphonic. When you hit unison, what it does is it stacks voices on top of each other. And some synths let you choose how many of the available voices you get to stack. Some don't, and some have different ways that they deal with panning and spreading and everything else like that. But here's really what I want to say about it. It's an incredibly useful tool sometimes that can be overused. If your job is to make banks of patches, I promise you, if you turn in a bank of patches where most of them are using unison or some sort of stacked mode or detuned stack mode, you're going to hear comments like, then there's something about all your patches that sound the same. So it's a great tool, don't overuse it. What is it that makes it obvious that you used it? Well, anytime you stack near identical things on top of each other within a fairly short period of time or phase, you're going to get some kinds of cancellations or boosts. Some frequencies are going to be on top of each other. Some frequencies are going to be 180 degrees out of phase with each other. And so there's a certain, I'll call it a hollowness that you hear if there's too much phasing going on. And also, I've noticed that there's an oddity in the attack. There's a thumpy attack that you get when you use unison mode, especially if you really start stacking up the voices. Now, there'll be times when that thump is exactly what you want. So I'm not saying don't use it. I'm just saying be aware of these little sonic artifacts that come from it. Right now I have the OB-6 by Dave Smith, Tom Overheim. Beautiful 6-voice analog synth. And I have a very plain sound. And it's just a single oscillator, no vibrato, no effects, plain as I can be. Only one oscillator, so there's no detuning. All right? And on this one, when you kick in the unison mode, it turns it into a monophonic synth. And these buttons on either side of the screen let you choose how many voices you want to stack. And that's important because the artifacts, as you keep stacking more voices, the artifacts build up as well. So I'm going to hit the unison button, and I'm using this, and it's showing me that I currently have 2 voices. I can do 3, 4, 5, 6, and then if I go one more, it goes into chord mode, but we're going to do a different episode on chord mode. So I'm going to turn it off again, and here is a single oscillator, no stacking, and here it is with unison on. And so right away you hear that zizzle from phasing, and you'll notice the tuning's pretty close, so it wasn't moving much. Now I'm going to turn the detune up a little bit. So I'm getting some motion. And I'll turn that up some more. So obviously you can detune it to the point of sounding seasick, which I've never been a fan of that sound. But now I'm going to stack some more oscillators, and I'm going to use a slight detuning so it's more obvious as I stack more. So we'll call that a pleasant amount of detuning. And now I'm going to hold the unison button, and I'm going to go from 2 to 3. Here's 2. Here's 3. 4. 5. And 6. Now, first off, notice that it gets louder. I mean, that's just going to happen. You're stacking more voices right on top of each other. But another thing that you notice, especially more on the digital synths, but even on some of the analogs, there's just this phase cancellation, this slightly flangey, stationary flange. But more important, there's also a change in the attack. There's kind of a thump in the attack. Turn it off. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. You might have a patch where having that little extra thump in the beginning and the extra volume and the extra solidity is something that you want. Now, notice as I play with the pan spread that you get different qualities as well. I'll leave it on 6 for the most dramatic effect. So as I spread it out, you definitely feel it. There's a distance. It doesn't feel like the synth sound is as present and right in front of you as when I turn it the other way. But it is, like I said, a useful thing. Just don't do all your patches that way. And if you're doing a song, don't have more than one, really, a patch that's doing that unison trick. Because again, you'll just start hearing it as an artifact that you might not hate it when you're recording, but after you listen to your song 100 times, you're like, man, I wish I hadn't done quite so much of that Unison Detune. Your call. So now I'm going to switch to a different synth. So now I have the ASM Hydrasynth. It's an all-digital synth, but it does have a unison mode that is similar with just a few differences. And so again, I'm starting from an init, sawtooth, one oscillator, organ envelope, no vibrato, no effects. And to get to unison on this one, you go into the voice mode. So you hit the voice mode, and in the very top left, it says polyphony. And your first choice is poly, which means it's just an 8-voice polyphonic synthesizer. And if I change it to mono, I want you to notice that there's no sonic difference between poly playing one note and mono playing one note. Doesn't know, doesn't care. But if I go into unison, I'll go back to density of 1, which is just the exact same as not having it on. And now watch as I slowly change the density. That's one voice, which shouldn't do anything. Here's 2 voices. Now right away you're hearing a much more aggressive phasing sound because you're doubling everything. And then 3, 4, 5, and 6. And notice there's that thump coming in and a little bit of lower mid fatness, which is either a good thing or a bad thing or a neutral thing, depending on what you're going for. Now I'm going to go back to 2 voices and I'm going to increase the detune. Now things should start getting pretty serious. And now I'm going to leave that detuning where it is, and I'm going to go to the other number of voices. So here's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Hear that? It's just one of the things I notice. And again, if you're making sounds for the factory bank for a company, they won't be happy if all of your sounds are using unison with detune, because there's a certain sameness to that. It's a great solution sometimes, just don't overuse it. Okay, now let's take the detune into some crazy territory. Now, if you can, on some sense, you can control that parameter. That might be a neat thing to have on a wheel or something. And really thick detuning is great when you're trying to get, the sound of a bunch of angry bees. Now, another thing that's interesting on this digital one, if you're trying to reduce some of those artifacts, they have this random phase switch, and it can be either on or off. And basically, either the waveform starts at exactly the same place every time you hit a key, or you never know where it's going to start in the wave phase. So which one's right? You're going to have to play your sound in your style and see which one's better. But listen to the difference. So here's 6 voices of density. Well, we'll go all the way to 8. And a not unpleasant amount of detuning. And now I'm going to turn the random phase on. So every time those oscillators would be at a different phase. So first with it off and with it on. So right away you notice it doesn't have that repetitive punch like this, which you might like for that sound. And it just is a little smoother. it also helps, obviously, I don't need the density all the way up at 8. But now, like on the Oberheim, I have stereo width. And so listen as I start spreading the width. It definitely has a different sound that's interesting. And because they're spread out in panning, they tend to create fewer of those artifacts by being layered on top of each other. It's a slight thing. Just always be aware to try it. Try it with the random phase on and off. Try different amounts of detuning. Try different amounts of notes. And there are some synthesizers that when you use fewer notes to do unison, you actually can have more polyphony. So hopefully that'll give you a little more confidence to go in and try the unison mode on your various analog and digital synths. If you have any questions about the Dave Smith Tom Oberheim OB-6 or the ASM Hydrasynth, please contact your Sweetwater sales engineer. If you're enjoying this Synth Clips, we have a playlist down below that has all the ones I've made so far, and I plan to make more. So if you have any ideas of what you would like to have as a topic for a Synth Clip, just put it in the YouTube comments. My name is Daniel Fisher. Thank you very much for watching.